Hey guys, it's Alex here. Now you may remember earlier in the year I made a video telling you why you shouldn't get a copper banded butterfly. And in a move that might see me branded as a massive hypocrite, I have now bought myself a second one. Now with the last copper banded butterfly I bought, I didn't follow all the guidance I should have done, so today I'm going to tell you what I've done differently this time. Now this video isn't intended as an expert guide on how to keep a copper band at all. I'm just telling you what I'm doing differently this time and the changes I'm making to maximise my chances of success. Now if it's your first time here at the channel, I put out a video every week with tips on how to set up and maintain an awesome reef tank. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on anything. Right, let's get stuck in. So this is the fourth copper banded butterfly I've bought over the years, and none of my previous efforts have lasted more than a couple of months. The last one I bought was found dead in my tank after about a month, and that was despite the fact that he'd been eating frozen food in the shop before I bought him and in my tank for a few weeks. There was also Aiptasia in my tank and what I thought was plenty of microfauna like fanworms for him to munch on. But what that last fish showed me is that you have to be prepared to put a lot of effort and money into getting a copper band and be prepared to make many sacrifices elsewhere. For a start, I spent about 3 months searching for the best specimen I could find. I only looked in shops I trust, and if the fish wasn't eating or looked thin, I moved on. I also wanted to find a copper band the right size. I've read anecdotal evidence that suggests any copper band that was either too big or too small would be less likely to adapt to captivity. I must have seen close to 100 copper bands during my search before I found the right one. And I eventually found one that had been in the shop for over a week, so had a little time to recover from his travels, and I observed him for a good 5 minutes in the shop to see if there were any signs of illness or injury and to see if he looked thin. In terms of illness, the most obvious things to look for are any white spots on their bodies that might be parasites. But there are other less obvious signs. In my experience, copper bands seem to suffer from lymphocystis more than most fish. Lympho is a viral disease that presents as little fluffy balls on the fish, often on their fins. Unlike parasites like white spot, it's not necessarily a major issue and is only a viral disease, but it's often a sign of a stressed fish, so walk away if you see it. I was also looking for signs of flukes, which aren't always obvious to spot, but are common on butterfly fish. If a fish is shaking its head, that's a sign it might have flukes, so again, walk away. Once I was satisfied it was a healthy fish, I asked to see it feeding, and it ate brine shrimp quite eagerly. Now I saw plenty of hesitant feeders during my search, and you've got to wonder how they'll get on in a display tank where your established fish will go crazy for the food the second it goes in your tank. I reserved him, came back the next day and repeated the same checks. He passed with flying colours, so I finally bit the bullet. Now my last copper band got a bit of a seeing tooth from my purple tang when I introduced him, and there's no reason that this would be any different, so I added the copper band to an acclimation box first to let the tang get used to him and let the copper band settle. Now many people say it's best to leave the fish in an acclimation box for days or even weeks to get them feeding, but I personally much prefer the idea of other arrangements to get the fish feeding and to let them loose so they can at least search for natural food sources in the tank. Now I'm not saying that's the better way to do it, it's just my approach. I put a mirror up to distract the purple tang, which did the job nicely, but whenever I tried to take the mirror away, he turned his attention to the copper band, and I felt the tang was also getting unnecessarily stressed by his reflection in the mirror. So remember at the start when I said you have to make compromises? Well, my first compromise was to remove the tang. It's an absolutely beautiful fish and one of my favourite of all the tangs. But he had to go for the benefit of the copper band, so I sold him to a local hobbyist. To get the copper band started, I made this feeder out of a glamorous urine sample cup. Fortunately for him, not a used one. I made beak-sized holes and put PE mysis in it, then put it in the corner of my tank where he'd set up camp. Now it did work, but not actually as I'd intended. He showed no interest in putting his snout in it, but it did occasionally drop food out next to him, which he slowly gobbled up. Because it was a still area of the tank, the food didn't float away, and he didn't have any competition, which gave him a chance to eat it. And that brings me to my second compromise, heavy feeding. I have piled in food since I've added the copper band, with at least 9 or 10 cubes of frozen per day, as well as a variety of other foods. I've tried clams in a half shell that he wasn't interested in, although it's since been suggested to me that only uncooked clams work, and sourcing niche foods like that in the UK isn't easy. I've also tried Easy Reef's mastic that many people have great success with, as well as lobster eggs, chopped shrimp, garlic mysis and bloodworm. Of all of that, the only things that have worked for me on this occasion are PE mysis and bloodworm. Now PE mysis is a very rich and oily food indeed, and I've found myself having to clean algae off the glass every day now, and I dread to think what my nitrate and phosphate levels are like. Fortunately, my tank is established and has a ton of filtration, and at almost 3 years old it can deal with the extra nutrition without having algae take over, although it's probably not doing me any favours. Now I've only had the fish for 3 weeks, so I have a long road ahead of me, and I'll have to continue overfeeding and trying new food options to give him some variety. But as well as getting him to eat frozen food, he has at least cleared 90% of my Aiptasia. I've never seen him touch the stuff, but it's disappeared since he's been in the tank, so he gets credit for either eating the stuff himself or persuading my lazy peppermint shrimp to finally pull their fingers out. Or toes, or whatever shrimp have. And while I'm not one to point the finger, a couple of my acans are suddenly looking a little bit like they've been nibbled on. Another example of a compromise you may have to make, although I actually hate these particular green acans, so he's doing me a favour there. Now I may still come to regret this fish, and I'm still not more than 50% confident he'll last more than a few months. But I wanted to make this video to show you the kind of sacrifice and effort you have to go to even stand a chance of keeping a copper band. And even what I've done pales into insignificance compared with the length many others will go to. It's not a fish to be underestimated, and certainly not one for the faint-hearted. And it's genuinely really sad if you find one of these guys dead in your tank. But keep an eye out for this guy swimming around in my tank behind me in intros, and I'll do a long-term update, hopefully when he's settled and plump, but also if he doesn't make it. Now if you look closely at some of the footage, you may see on the fish's left hand side that he has a bit of a mark on his body, and he looks like he might even have on his left fin a sign of lymphocystis. Now that wasn't present in the shop when I got him, so he might well have scratched himself on a rock or had a bit of a beating with a tang that stressed him out, but it's a good reminder of how delicate these fish are. But if you want to follow his progress and see how he gets on, then make sure you subscribe for future videos. You'll always see him in the background of the intro and outro to my videos, and when I can confidently say I've had success, I'll do a proper update telling you how he's got on. If you enjoyed the video, then give me a thumbs up and subscribe for next week, and until next time, happy reefing.